Welcome to Guitar Chamber Music Press. We are pleased to be with you and be represented at the first virtual GFA Vendors Expo held in cyberspace. Guitar Chamber Music Press is devoted to publishing music both new and old, composed and arranged for guitar and guitar in ensemble. Our catalog contains hundreds of scores for guitar, including works for solo, duo, trio, quartet, ensemble, chamber music, and more, representing 34 individual composers and arrangers who are educators and performers as well. Visit our website at guitarchambermusic.org. Please notice our About menu, which tells you more about Guitar Chamber Music Press and navigating the website. Included are works from the Renaissance to the present day, in many genres, seasonal, sacred, and secular. Our catalog includes works by Bach, Handel, Mozart, Haydn, and Bizet, to name just a few, as well as original compositions by Glenn Kaluta, Dave Burdick, Scott Boer, Guido Sanchez, Portuguese, Garth Baxter, and many more. Your music order will ship within 24 hours. Thank you for visiting our website at www.guitarchambermusic.org. Be well and be safe.
Hello to all my GFA friends and guitar family. A special shout out to my Woodring family if you're watching. It is an honor to be a part of this year's online GFA festival, and I hope you're enjoying it. I want to welcome you guys to the Woodring Guitar Shop that we built 2 years ago. It's brand new, and I've been really enjoying building guitars in here. We also get to host concerts and master classes, and I can't wait to resume doing that once we start getting to more normalcy in life again. As you can see, I've been pretty busy building commissions, which is pretty awesome to have right now. And hopefully start some new ones in this fall. If you have any questions or want more information about my guitars, please visit my website at woodringguitars.com. And in the meantime, I want you guys to just stay healthy and safe, and I hope to see many of you soon. And I look forward to the 2021 GFA in Fullerton, California. Take care, everyone.
Like most guitar makers, I work alone. That's why conventions like GFA are important to me. I always look forward to get together with old friends. Visiting city, seeing concerts. It was the highlight of the year. Not this year. We all know why. Instead, I found beauty in my immediate surroundings. I started experimenting guitar making almost 40 years ago. I quickly narrowed it down to classical guitars. I love the richness of its tone, its repertoire, and mostly the people. After years of listening to classical guitar, I developed a strong opinion on how my guitar should sound like. I make every effort necessary to achieve that sound. The sound I want comes through both design and wood, especially the soundboard. Whenever possible, I travel to the supplier warehouse to hand select the wood of these tops. I measure density on site. Once at the shop, I measure stiffness, damping, and keep a database. This database allows me to evaluate the quality of my wood and also brush aside many myths about both wood species and guitar making in general. I measure constantly what I built. This allows me to better understand and hear the effects of the choices I've made. Obviously, guitar making is still art. I'll still rely on intuition, experience, skills, know-how, and attention to details. Combining art with data helps me reach my goals reliably. I do have a waiting list, and the people waiting my guitars expect something consistent with what they have seen from me in the past. So this makes the GFA all the more important. It gives me the opportunity to try new ideas, show my progress as a guitar maker. Because almost after 40 years, I am still learning, and that's what I like about my job. I will not be there in 2021, but hopefully I'll see you in 2022.
Bueno, con esta guitarra tuve el honor de tocar en el Palau de la Música en el 50 aniversario de Manufacturas Alhambra y es la guitarra de siricote, el modelo aniversario. Es de cedro y los aros y el fondo son de siricote y la verdad es que tiene toda la gama y las sutilezas tímbricas del cedro aprovechadas al máximo y toda la potencia, y un concierto sin amplificación perfectamente cómodo me sentí con esta guitarra.
The sound I found very charming. Vibrato is very easy to make, and it
Yeah,
sounds
definitely.
actually very good.
I think Imperial was my favorite one because it has really good projection, but mostly it just suits my guitar best.
I fell in love with Regal strings, and I use them on my guitar. For live use, I think it's amazing.
Good afternoon and welcome back to block 2 of 3 today. We're really excited to have you back. We have 3 lectures that are going to be the bulk of the content for this afternoon. We have first up a lecture by Ciyadh Wells that's about creating a diverse and inclusive guitar community. That will be followed by a live Q&A in the Zoom rooms. Then our second lecture is with McCallie talking about Bream repertoire. And our final lecture of the afternoon is Jim McCutcheon, my first guitar teacher, talking about making a living in the music business. All 3 of these will have live Q&As afterwards. And I want to draw your attention to the fact that our first lecture with Ciyadh Wells, we're going to have to change the Zoom room ID because there was a little bit of a technical glitch. So they're going to place the new Zoom meeting ID in the chat on both Facebook and YouTube. And everyone who's registered, you can also check your email for a direct link that you can just click right in to join that conversation and get your questions into that chat. Enjoy the afternoon.
Well, hello, everyone. And I would like to welcome you to creating a diverse and inclusive guitar community by me. I am Ciyadh Wells, and I'm so glad and grateful to have you here today. I would first like to say thank you to the Guitar Foundation of America for making this event possible online. It's truly amazing what a little bit of Zoom and a lot of technology and manpower can do. So much appreciation to all of those who've made this happen. Black Lives Matter. I want to first take a moment to acknowledge that we live in difficult times and that conversations around diversity, equity, and inclusion, and even anti racism and oppression are hard to have. But you've shown up here today because, in some way, you care and you're ready to start having this conversation. The goal of this conversation is in no way to accuse any one person or group of people for doing a certain thing. Someone recently said to me that you can't apologize for the people who came before you for what your ancestors have done, but you can and should apologize and acknowledge the ignorance that you might have had up until whichever point. We've all been born into and have made to live and exist within a system, especially in classical music, that was built to oppress and deny people of access, rights, and dignity. And that is not our burden to bear. Our burden, though, is to work to dismantle this system that has been upheld for so many years. So, regardless of if you play guitar or if you just love the instrument, we can all do something that will make our community more diverse, more equitable, and more accepting for and by everyone. So, please keep that in mind throughout this conversation. And if at any point that you have questions, you can just drop them in the chat. And then, as Martha has said, we will have a live Q&A following my presentation. So first, I wanted to tell you a little bit about myself. Again, my name is Ciyadh Wells, and my pronouns are she, her, and hers. I am the founder and executive director of the Margins Guitar Collective, which is a group I founded in 2018 that works to support and create an inclusive and diverse guitar community through a commissioning program and a concert series. I work as a development associate at Austin Classical Guitar here in Austin, Texas, where I'm zooming in from. I play in duo charango, which is a new music guitar duo. I'm a doctorate student at the University of Georgia studying guitar performance. I am in the Sphinx Lead program, which is a program designed specifically for arts administrators of color. And if you look on the screen here, you will see that I have a cat, and her name is Ollie, and she is precious. She is a short-haired orange tabby. But ultimately, I'm a person who's deeply committed and interested in diversity, equity, and inclusion, and how the music community, and more specifically, the guitar community, can begin addressing these things in real and concrete ways. So first, let's look at some guiding themes and goals. Our guiding themes for this conversation are going to be identity, diversity, equity, and inclusion. I'm learning that we all come to this work and to these conversations with various terminology and language. And I think that's a great thing. I think it's also important to have some kind of baseline understanding so that we can understand each other when we are talking about these things. Again, there could and there should be multiple ways of defining each of these words. The definitions that I will include here are simply just things that I think are great to understand. And our goals, again, will be to acquire some knowledge of those important terms, and then to explore some actionable ways for all of the members of our community to engage with diversity and inclusion in a meaningful and intentional way. So we will begin with defining and acquiring some language. And then finally, we will discuss what you can do when you leave this Zoom call today. But first, I wanted to talk about identity. You'll hear me say identity and its various related forms throughout this presentation a lot today, and because it's important to understand, especially when we're talking about diversity and equity and inclusion. The Center for Creative Leadership says that social identities are labels that people use to categorize and to identify themselves or others as members of specific groups. So these social identities could be based around these various things that I'm going to say. So they could be based around age, ability, education, ethnicity, race, gender identity and expression, geographic location, marital and family status, national origin or immigration status, religion, sexual orientation, and social economic status and economic background. That was by no means an exhaustive list, but just a list of some of the social identities that have come to exist within our society. So this is a great list and that you're looking at on the screen. And these are the 4 things to remember about social identities. The first thing to remember is that social identities are dynamic. There is no one specific way to acquire a social identity. For instance, we might choose one of those identities. We might have been born into one of those identities. Sometimes our identities are visible, they're invisible, they are stable, they are shifting. So they're always changing. Everyone has multiple identities, and different combinations impact our different lived experiences. So sociological. Because social identities are norm dependent, what is and what is not considered a social identity can change over time and in different cultures. And social identities can be more or less salient depending on the situation. So they can be more prominent in certain contexts and not so prominent in other contexts. And these are just things we want to keep in mind as we're talking about how to create a community that is inclusive of all of these identities. Social identities are important and they're powerful because we as humans use them to categorize ourselves and each other. This categorization often lays the foundation for biases, stereotypes, prejudice, and favoritism. When thinking about identities, it is crucial to understand that because of how these are formed, we as humans will often categorize people unintentionally, meaning that we will make assumptions about them before we even get to know them. For instance, you might see someone with longer hair and you might assume based on a social norm that that person identifies with a particular gender group. And that might not be true. You might see someone whose skin looks to be of a certain color, and you might assume that they are of a different race than the one with which they actually identify. In any case, it is important to remember that no one owes you an answer about their identity. And it's never our place to assume. It's never our place to also ask someone about their identity. People will share when they're ready, and that's hard to swallow because we as people, we as social creatures feel like we have to know what that person identifies as. But I'm going to challenge you to be okay with not knowing. If you don't know a person's gender, don't assume. If a situation presents itself, you might ask that person their pronouns, but otherwise you might consider using other gender non-specific language. That is a conversation, sure, for another day. And if you'd like to have that conversation with me, please get in contact and we can totally have it because I'd love to. So don't worry, we will definitely start talking about music soon, but first we're going to move on to diversity. So what is diversity? Diversity is the condition of having or being composed of differing elements of variety. I've got this definition from the Merriam-Webster Dictionary. So thinking about diversity, we often think about groups of people and the varied social identities that they might have. People seem to be most aware and familiar with these ideas. And so I think for me, this picture that you're seeing does a great job of painting a picture of what diversity can and often looks like in our society. It's people of different races, it's people with different kinds of hair, it's people who are wearing different types of clothes. And these people have probably various and varied thoughts and opinions, which we should all be celebrating. It's a very great thing. Okay, so equality versus equity. Equity, and understandably so, is where understanding these words that we use to describe this kind of work starts to diverge a little bit. So in this picture, and there are many pictures like this, there are 3 people and they are at a baseball game. If you want, you can imagine a post-COVID-19 world and we're all watching the finals of next year's International Concert Artist Competition hosted by the GFA. Does anybody see what I did there? Okay, so anyway, you're trying to watch a thing and all you want to do is to be able to see that thing and have a great experience and have the same experience as everyone around you. On the equality side of the screen, you'll notice that each of the people have been given the exact same brown box. The person in the blue shirt is the tallest, may not need the box, but was still given the box. If you look at the person in the purple shirt, they were given the same box, but they still can't see. The person in the purple shirt also now has the most unrestricted view of anyone there. This is equality, the idea that we are in effect all the same and that our sameness means that we all have the same needs and wants. As you see, our differing challenges and abilities means that we do not all have the same needs. Therefore, giving us all the same thing will not yield the same results. Equity, on the other hand, is the quality of being fair and impartial. So if you look at the other side of the screen, you'll see the person in the purple shirt has now been given 2 boxes, whereas the person in the blue shirt doesn't have any boxes because they can see without them. I think of this ultimately being given what you need in order to get to the same place as everyone else. Our focus on equality in society has created deep inequity and deep inequality. And I think here is the start of the problem. And if you notice, each side of the picture that only has 3 boxes. They've just been distributed in a different way. So inclusion. Inclusion is a feeling that you're supposed to be there, that you deserve to be there, and that you're there because you matter. Your voice, your presence, your existence, it matters. On the screen, it says, inclusivity means not just we're allowed to be there, but we are valued. Inclusion means that people, regardless of their abilities, have the right to be respected and appreciated as valuable members to their communities. And that's from the Institute for Community Inclusion. So you might be asking yourself, why does this matter? Well, it matters because we matter. People who look like me, people who sound like you, people of differing abilities, people with different thoughts and beliefs, it all matters that we're included. And in order to figure out where we need to be or where we have to go as a community, we have to think about and acknowledge where we are now. So where are we in the classical contemporary music community and in the guitar community? I've given various parts of this presentation before, and I love to start by asking a series of fairly eye-opening, sometimes challenging questions. So, how many of you have ever attended a classical guitar concert where the guitarist on stage might identify as Black? Or how many of you have been to a classical guitar concert where a female composer, a Black composer, might have had their music on the program? I'm not going to ask you to type those answers in the chat, but I do want you to think about it. And if you're a lover of guitar and your answer is in probably the single digits or maybe the lower double digits like mine, then I think we can all acknowledge that we have some work to do. So that's where we are now. Let's take an official look. People love data, and for good reasons. Data helps us to understand and communicate things to each other using numbers. In this next section, I'm going to take a moment to reference one study that was completed by the League of American Orchestras, and then a data set that was compiled by the Institute for Composer Diversity, just to see where we are now. Ultimately, this is going to just set some context for how things are. I am not sure if a study like this exists within the guitar community, but if it does, please let me know. Or if you would like to be a part of starting a study like this, also let me know, because I would love to work on that with you. So again, the first study that we'll look at is Racial, Ethnic, and Gender Diversity in the Orchestra Field, a report by the League of American Orchestras with research and data analysis by James Dozier. And this study was published in 2016, and the actual complete study took place over a span of 34 years, and more than 500 orchestras were included in this study. So let's start with the good. It seems that in the orchestra field, in terms of gender representation, both on and off stage, things are getting much better. That means that we're getting closer to a 50-50 gender representation in that part of the community. I will say that I am unaware as to if this study takes into account musicians who might not either identify as male or female, but I hope that in the future, studies like this will include those musicians as well, because that is important to acknowledge. So let's talk about the not so good. Over the span of 34 years, it does seem that musicians who identify as non-white increased fourfold from about 3.4% in 1980 to 14.2% in 2004. So the graph that you'll see on the screen is just a snapshot of that data. So for musicians who identify as Asian, Pacific Islander, there has been an increase in their representation on stage. But for musicians who identify as Hispanic or Latino and African American or Black, there isn't and there hasn't been such great numbers, an increase. So since this study is about 6 years old at this point, I want to say that recently I heard that for African Americans, it's closer to 3%, but I'm not exactly sure. I'm sure, though, that number is out there somewhere. So this just is some context around the musicians who we're seeing on stage in the orchestras, which are a lot of the ways that people engage with music. But of course, not the only, because guitar is awesome. All right, so repertoire. Another aspect to diversity, equity, and inclusion beyond who we see on the stage is who we hear from the stage. When we go to a concert, whose music are we hearing? Is it primarily of one race and one gender? Let's take a look. Again, this scorecard here is from the Institute for Composer Diversity, which is a resource in the music community that exists in order to advance an environment in which historically underrepresented groups are fully represented and supported. And they have a wealth of knowledge and information on their website. And so I don't think I mentioned this earlier, but I did create a resource and a website page that has all of the things that I've mentioned here today. So if you miss it, don't worry about it. You will be able to find it, and we'll make sure that that gets to you. So going back to this scorecard, what they did was they took the repertoire from this current season that just ended, from 120 orchestras, and they analyzed whose music was being played most often. This analysis is by no means perfect and doesn't include different types of series that orchestras do. So it doesn't include maybe like new music series or things like that, but it provides, I think, a really broad and general overview. And ultimately, it seems that most orchestras are presenting seasons that are overwhelmingly white and overwhelmingly male, which I think presents a greater call for diversity of repertoire in the music community. So you're saying to yourself, okay, Ciyadh, I get it. We have to do better. I'm pumped. What can we do? Well, that's where we are now. We've learned that in terms of representation of musicians on stage and in terms of diversity of composers being represented, the majority of musicians identify with one race and one gender. Before we get to what you can do, I will say that our commitment to diversity has to extend beyond these next 6 months or 6 years. The music community deserves a committed effort and a continued investment in making this community a more welcoming place. So again, you might be asking yourself, what can I, as a guitarist, a composer, a professor, an administrator, a volunteer, a student, a lover of guitar, do in my community, in my everyday life, to address the lack of diversity, inequity, and great exclusion that happened and happens in the guitar community up until this point? So here are some things that I think that you can do. These ideas are a collection of things that I think I would like to see, but also things that I've heard others. Again, by no means exhaustive. You live in your community and you know what you will need to serve your community best. So just keep that in mind. This is just a starting place. This is just day one of hopefully many, many generations to come. So actionable ways to address diversity. For guitarists, performers, you can listen to and learn more pieces by composers who identify from a diverse background. For professors, you can expand your recruitment efforts into different areas. For administrators, decision makers, you can hire more diverse teachers, staff members, recruit diverse board of directors members. And for everyone else, and for all of us, we can make sure to hold our organizations and communities accountable for the changes that they have committed to making. Well, Ciyadh, what if there are none? What if I can't find a teacher or a staff member who doesn't look like the rest of our staff? What if they're not qualified? I want you to be continually thinking about what it means to be qualified. Qualified based on what? Based on standards that you created and you set, and maybe you alone? Did a diverse group of individuals have thought and say as to what those standards are? I think it's important to think about that, because oftentimes that we find these standards were set up in a system that was specifically designed to oppress people with various identities. And if you want to continue to work within that system, that's fine, but you have to admit that you might be intentionally perpetuating harm on a group of people if you don't think about it and challenge yourself a little bit more. To further address the qualification point, I would never expect you to pick someone, and I don't think anyone ever expects someone to just pick someone random. You would never just, open your door and say, hey, first person, you are now part of whatever thing. That's really not the point. I think the point is that we can diversify our thinking and our standards and be flexible and open to our community as we work towards change. So you're a person who makes decisions, you're a performer, you're an administrator, you're a professor, and you're wondering, well, should I have just include one? Do I have a whole program of just composers who identify of a certain gender or race or something? And the answer is that there is no magic number, and you have to continue to think about what is really best for you. So if you look at this graph on the screen, these are a set of recommendations that the Institute for Composer Diversity came up when you're thinking about programming. These stats are, again, just recommendations, and I think that they are based on the demographics of our society as it is now. I'm not completely sure, and I couldn't find that answer, so please don't quote me with it. But if you do find out, and please tell me, because I would really love to know. Ultimately, I think it tells us that we need to be thinking and listening a little bit broader to our music, and that we also have to be programming with some more intentionality. And there will be lots of questions around this, and I think it's a conversation to be had on many different levels. It's not a conversation that's going to stop today. This is just a starting point for what will work for you. So we have some actionable ways to address equity. For guitarists, you can commission composers from diverse backgrounds and pay them their rate. And I know this is hard, but composers are people too, and they need to eat, and their art helps them to do that. So when they give you a rate, do your best to pay it, and if you can, pay more. That wouldn't be such a bad thing. For professors, work to alleviate financial barriers that the institutions at which you work have set up. This is a tough one. No one is expecting the American or the United States education system to change overnight. That would be amazing, but it's not going to happen. It's unrealistic. But what we can do is to provide our students with some more resources. For instance, that could be scholarships, it could be patrons, it could be any number of things. And it will take a little bit of extra work. It just will. And that's okay. That is part of making this community a place that is welcoming for everybody. It's a part of giving everybody what they need in order to get where they want to go. So for decision makers, you can provide the necessary amount of resources to give the community members that you serve more equitable opportunities. My example for this one is often sliding ticket sales and rethinking seating arrangements. So for ticket sales, I've never been to a concert myself where I've seen this kind of system work for a large group of people, but I've seen it for small organizations and things like that, and I think it works. It allows people to engage with your work in a way that is most accessible for them. And we have to keep our community in mind as we are thinking about things that work for them. And again, for everyone else, for all of us, we can hold our organizations and communities accountable for the changes that they have committed to making. So personally, what I have done is I've set some kind of reminders to go back and to just check in with people and see how they're doing. Because again, I mentioned that this commitment has to extend beyond the next 6 months or 6 years. It's really a commitment for multiple generations of musicians to come. So, actionable ways to address inclusion. For guitarists, we can encourage greater community building efforts. That means inviting others to our gatherings. That means having more social gatherings, more guitar hangs, because we all love those things. But it is making everyone feel included, making everyone feel like they're supposed to be there, and not saying things and doing things that makes them feel otherwise. So for professors, you can create spaces and opportunities within your studios for all of your students to feel heard and understood. For administrators and decision makers, listen to the wants and needs of your communities that you serve and address them with greater intention and action. So if someone in your community comes up to you and says, hey, can you do this thing, and you do the thing with great intention and with purpose, then I think that helps the people feel like they're being included. And for everyone else, we have to make people feel important. So much of what we do as artists and as people who love music is about feeling. It's about sharing. It's about storytelling. And we have to make everyone feel important if we want this community to continue on beyond us. So I am going to leave you with just one thing. What questions do you have for me? And I believe that Tracy is going to come in and chat with me, and we're going to talk about some of your questions.
Hi there.
Hey, can you see me?
I can see you. Can you see me?
Yes. Okay.
Okay, great. Well, on behalf of the GFA, I'd like to welcome everyone to this live Q&A with Ciyadh Wells. And thank you, Ciyadh, for giving such an important and informative lecture and for joining us today for this live Q&A. Before we begin, I'd like to remind you guys that are viewing on the live stream, if you would like to take part in this Q&A, I think you can still register. I'm not sure, we had some technical difficulties, but check your email if you have registered to look for the link for this Q&A. And for those who are taking part in it now, please feel free to submit the questions through the Q&A feature, which should be at the bottom of your screen. And Ciyadh and I will do our best to get to all of them. And you can also participate by upvoting questions that you see that you may also have. We have a limit of about 15 minutes for our chat before the live stream will move on to the next event, but we can break off and continue to discuss and just get to your questions for a little while longer. All right, so thank you, Ciyadh, again, for helping to educate us and for sharing your ideas for enriching our community and moving it forward into greater diversity and inclusion. We appreciate you taking on this important work, which all too often falls on the shoulders of people of color and women of color in particular. So thank you again for that. Are you ready for some questions?
Yes, please.
All right, well, let's see what we've got here. Here it is. Okay, so Patrick is asking, he's been playing guitar for several years and he wants to know, who are the Black composers for guitar?
Well, Patrick, you said this, right?
That's right, Patrick.
Okay, great. So Patrick, it's great that you mentioned that, because recently myself and another guitarist whose name is Neil Beckman started a website and a database called Guitar Music by Black Composers. And it is a website where you can go and learn about not all, but you can learn about a lot of the Black composers out there who have composed a work for guitar, or that includes guitar. And yes, there are some. That's also a question I get a lot, and it's totally fine. It's not your fault, but they're out there, and you can visit that website. You can also listen to a Spotify playlist that we made and a YouTube playlist, so you can hear the music as well.
And I've shared that link in the chat for those of you who can access that. Okay, GFA asks, what kind of community outreach have you done, and what do you find to be the most effective approach?
I think I've found the most effective approach to community outreach to just like be genuine. It's like, I'm being serious. You know, if you go to your community and say, we're doing this thing that we really care about, will you please be involved? I think they're going to be more likely to say yes than if you were to simply kind of do something halfway, not really care about it, and expect people to just come and be there. That's not really how it works. So just being intentional, reaching out, spending time with people is another thing. You know, I heard a quote recently that was like, social change moves at the speed of relationships. And so building relationships with people is so important. And I think in the guitar community, we're so good at that. We're friends, and it's just like keep making friends, and be nice to them and make them feel great, like you would hope that they would do for you.
Wow, social change moves at the speed of relationships. That's amazing. Okay, Fabio asks, congrats. Oh, he says, congrats for the lecture and for the inspiring ideas. And asks, have you talked with people from other countries and other continents about this same topic? Do you see any differences from the USA?
Yes. So tomorrow I'm taking place in a conversation around racial equity and inclusion that includes someone who is from France. And so that was my first kind of initial understanding of the differences in this when it comes to the US and other countries. So I'm really new to understanding how that works, but there still seems to be some deep issues there as far as diversity and inclusion, and acknowledging how those things show up in the music world and the music community. But I would love to, I want to learn more about that. And because I think I'm certain there are ways that we can enrich and connect all of our communities around the world, not just the USA. The USA is just the context that I know because I was born here and I live here.
Kathy says, hello, Ciyadh. Thank you for this thoughtful presentation. You mentioned the League of American Orchestras data collection. Do you think some of the policies implemented by many orchestras in the first part of the 20th century regarding the elimination of unconscious bias through blind auditions and shoeless entrances should be implemented in competitions such as the GFA?
Kathy, thank you so much for your question. And I'm going to say yes. I do think, this is not in any way a call out to the GFA competition. It's more of just like a competition wide sort of thing. I think it would be interesting to really explore what it would be like to have a competition that was judged like us all blindly. I'm sure it might have happened before, and I don't know what the results were from that. But if it hasn't happened, then it would be really interesting for someone to take that on. And again, that commitment to doing that has to be more than once. You know, you as the person who runs the competition, you can't say, oh, we tried it and we didn't like the result. That's it. You know, things like blind auditions and other policies that have been put in place to eliminate unconscious bias and implicit bias, they take a long time to really like get rid of and to make, you know, like stick and last. So I think it's totally possible. I think a lot of us, myself included, will have to rethink the idea of what a competition is and how it functions in our community, and how we can be inclusive in order to do that. But I would love to see it.
Klaus asks, is there a list of women composers who wrote for classical guitar in previous centuries?
Yes. So I believe that earlier today, Dr. Candice Mowbray did a lecture on women of classical guitar. And so I know in her lecture and on her website, she has like a really, really great detailed list of all of these things. In the resource that I created, there's also a link to another kind of database of just solo guitar compositions by women. It's not divided up by century, I don't think, but it's a great place to start. And there are lots of books. So I'm just going to grab this one book that I thought about. I know I still have books. I'm crazy. So this book is called Guitar Music by Women Composers, an Annotated Catalog. And it was compiled by Jonna McCallie and Kristen Aspen. And this is a really, really great book. It just has tons and tons of compositions. And then it has some biographical information for all of those composers as well. So this book is a little outdated, but it's a great place to start. And any of the research that I do about composers, I like to start with books just because that seems to be a place where a lot of this information used to be, because I was the only way. And some of it just hasn't made it on the internet. So books are a great place to start.
I also understand you're working on a video series called Women of Guitar, and you're featuring guitar compositions by women. Is that mostly sort of more modern compositions, or do you also do older pieces? Like
it's a mix. It's a mix of older pieces and newer pieces. For instance, there's a piece that I'm gonna record at some point soon that someone wrote for me like 2 months ago. So it's really, it runs the gamut there.
Great. So that might be another resource to look at when you get that up and running. What are your thoughts on arranging music by Black and Indigenous people of color composers, piano, orchestral, vocal, etc., for solo and multiple guitars? William Grant Still, Nathaniel Dett, Margaret Bonds, etc. Is this an equally good form of representation in the guitar world, or do you think original compositions are the better way to go?
Okay, so I am a person who loves new music. So when you say original compositions, I'm always thinking to like, oh, it would be great to have this person who's living compose something for guitar. But I think both are important. I think we can do both at the same time. And there are not enough of those arrangements out there either. So either of them are good, but both are better, as always. And new music is awesome. So that's kind of what I think. And there are a couple of arrangements out there by those composers already. I know that Duo Noir, who has a concert performance later this week, they play a version of a piece by Nathaniel Dett. I believe it's like Juba or something like that. So it's out there. It exists. It's totally possible, and I encourage it. And if you send it to me, I will play it.
Okay, Cami says, thank you, Ciyadh. This information is vital for our future and success as a community. And she wants to know, are you composing these days? And is your DMA thesis related to the topic at hand?
Cool. So, hi, Cami. I am not composing these days, although I think about it a lot. And yes, my dissertation research is related to this, and it is going to be on compositions for guitar by Black women composers. So at the moment, it is still pretty broad, but I am working on narrowing that down, and it has been such a cool journey so far, and I love it. And it's something that I'm going to be working on past whenever I complete my dissertation. So.
So you are artistic and executive director of the Margins Guitar Collective. Can you tell us a little bit about that?
Yeah, so I would say probably like 5 years ago, I began to notice that I wasn't finding a lot of people or seeing a lot of people in the guitar community who look like me. And when I would go to concerts, I wasn't hearing a lot of their music. And so I wanted to do something that would work to create the type of community that I wanted to see, and a community that I believe is the future. And so I started the Margie Guitar Collective officially in 2018. And so far, we have commissioned 10 composers to write 10 new works that include guitar. Some of them are chamber music, and some of the videos are already up on our YouTube channel. And we commission composers, we support artists, and we have concerts. And that, I think, is how I know how to contribute to this work. And I think it's a thing that's very important. So that's a little bit about that.
Great. William Ash says, "Hi, Ciyadh. This is all great. What role do you see for school guitar programs to engage and support minority students?"
Hey, Bill. Thanks for your question. I think that school guitar programs have the ability and should be focusing more on inclusion. So making sure that once our students come to us, are we able to make them feel like they're supposed to be there? And how are we doing that? And doing that with great intention. And remembering too that it's totally okay if classical music isn't the vehicle by which they continue learning, but it's really our job as teachers to make our students succeed and to feel good. So I think acknowledging that we have important work to do beyond what happens on the page is going to be a large part of that, and of how like we make students stay with the instrument and supporting them. And I think also going back to equity, giving our students the resources that they need. That could be financial. It could not be. It could be any number of things, but that's really an important part.
Okay, Michael says, "In your research of disciplines other than guitar, excuse me, what are the ways organizations or societies have engaged a diverse community? What intentions have created a fruitful impact?"
Yeah, so I've heard of a lot of partnerships blooming. Again, going back to relationships. So, for instance, I've heard of orchestras playing in other places in their community that are not orchestra hall, and making a continued and committed effort to doing that. So going to where your community is. And I was thinking the other day that, you know, we all live in places where there are so many communities. And so it can be difficult to try to reach all those communities, sure. But going to our communities and being there with them and asking them what they need is part of it. So again, concerts in those places, it can be lessons in those places. It can just be getting to know the people who live there. It doesn't always mean that you have to do a performance or somewhere else, but that is a good thing. Not an orchestra or a society, but recently the Manhattan School of Music announced that in the next year, all of their public performances would include a work by a Black composer. And that's another idea. That's another way that people have committed to this work with great intention. It's like they thought about it. They're like, we're going to do it. And they're going to do it. And I'm super excited to see how that turns out for them. And I hope, again, that number or that practice extends beyond the next year, especially because I'm not sure that we're going to all be able to see it, and I want to go see it.
I know. And you're doing that yourself in your duo as well, right? You're commissioning 3 women of contrasting racial backgrounds to write new works to be premiered in 2020. We hope, we wish.
So my duo partner and I, my duo partner is Jamie Monk, and his presentation is going to be tomorrow. So please attend that. I know I'll be there. But yes, we did a project late last year, early this year, called the Neoteric Guitar Project. And it is what you said, Tracy, a commissioning project in which we commissioned 3 women composers of varying racial backgrounds to write a piece for electric guitar duo, because sometimes we play electric guitar. And we were scheduled to premiere those works this past Saturday in Portland, but that didn't happen. So we are reworking how we're going to premiere those, but it should happen sometime this year. So again, commissioning composers, and again, like living music is a big part of what we do. It's something we really enjoy.
Great. Well, I want to thank you and thank everyone for participating in the live stream tonight. And we really appreciate you sharing these great ideas and paths forward. Huge thanks to you, Ciyadh, and everyone for participating and for having this live stream. So have a great night. Enjoy your evening.
Welcome to Guitar Chamber Music Press. We are pleased to be with you and be represented at the first virtual GFA Vendors Expo held in cyberspace. Guitar Chamber Music Press is devoted to publishing music both new and old, composed and arranged for guitar and guitar in ensemble. Our catalog contains hundreds of scores for guitar, including works for solo, duo, trio, quartet, ensemble, chamber music, and more, representing 34 individual composers and arrangers who are educators and performers as well. Visit our website at guitarchambermusic.org. Please notice our About menu, which tells you more about Guitar Chamber Music Press and navigating the website. Included are works from the Renaissance to the present day, in many genres, seasonal, sacred, and secular. Our catalog includes works by Bach, Handel, Mozart, Haydn, and Bizet, to name just a few, as well as original compositions by Glenn Kaluta, Dave Burdick, Scott Bohr, Guido Sanchez, Portuguese, Garth Baxter, and many more. Your music order will ship within 24 hours. Thank you for visiting our website at www.guitarchambermusic.org. Be well and be safe.
Hello to all my GFA friends and guitar family. A special shout out to my Woodring family if you're watching. It is an honor to be a part of this year's online GFA festival, and I hope you're enjoying it. I want to welcome you guys to the Woodring Guitar Shop that we built 2 years ago. It's brand new, and I've been really enjoying building guitars in here. We also get to host concerts and master classes, and I can't wait to resume doing that once we start getting to more normalcy in life again. As you can see, I've been pretty busy building commissions, which is pretty awesome to have right now. And hopefully start some new ones in this fall. If you have any questions or want more information about my guitars, please visit my website at woodringguitars.com. And in the meantime, I want you guys to just stay healthy and safe, and I hope to see many of you soon. And I look forward to the 2021 GFA in Fullerton, California. Take care, everyone.
Like most guitar makers, I work alone. That's why convention like GFA are important to me. I always look forward to get together with all friends. Visiting city, seeing concerts. It was the highlight of the year. Not this year. We all know why. Instead, I found beauty in my immediate surroundings. I started experimenting guitar making almost 40 years ago. I quickly narrowed it down to classical guitars. I loved the richness of its tone, its repertoire, and mostly the people. After years of listening to classical guitar, I developed a strong opinion on how my guitar should sound like. I make every effort necessary to achieve that sound. The sound I want comes through both design and wood, especially the soundboard. Whenever possible, I travel to the supplier warehouse to hand select the wood of these tops. I measure density on site. Once at the shop, I measure stiffness, damping, and keep a database. This database allows me to evaluate the quality of my wood and also brush aside many myths about both wood species and guitar making in general. I measure constantly what I built. This allows me to better understand and hear the effects of the choices I've made. Obviously, guitar making is still art. I'll still rely on intuition, experience, skills, know-how, and attention to details. Combining art with data helps me reach my goals reliably. I do have a waiting list, and the people waiting my guitars expect something consistent with what they have seen from me in the past. So this makes the GFA all the more important. It gives me the opportunity to try new ideas, show my progress as a guitar maker. Because almost after 40 years, I am still learning, and that's what I like about my job. I will not be there in 2021, but hopefully I'll see you in 2022.
Hello. For those of you who don't know me, I am Dr. Michael McCallie, and I will be presenting a lecture titled Julian Bream, A Survey of the Selected Works for Solo Guitar. I thought before we get started, it would be good for you to know a little bit about me and my history with this topic. First, I'm a professional guitarist and teacher currently located in Chattanooga, Tennessee, where I am the director of guitar programs at McCallie School. McCallie is an all-boys private boarding school and day school founded in 1905. Our guitar program typically has between 55 and 75 students enrolled, depending on the academic year. All of my formal education is in classical guitar performance. I received my Bachelor of Music at Stetson University under Dr. Stephen Robinson, my Master of Music at Yale University under Ben Verdery, and most recently, my Doctor of Music at Florida State University under Bruce Holtzman. While I was a student at Florida State, I spent over a year preparing my final treatise called A Survey of the Solo Works written for Julian Bream. So you might be able to see why I'm here today presenting at the GFA about the solo works written for Julian Bream. Below, I've provided the best email at which to reach me should you have questions or comments. I have also provided a link to Diginol, the online research database at Florida State University, should you wish to access my treatise free of charge. I will present this contact information again at the end of the lecture should you need it one more time. I would. Before we begin and to get our ears warmed up, I'd like to present a short clip of Julian Bream performing the ending pages from the Britten Nocturnal, written after John Dowland, Opus 70. The agenda for today's lecture can be seen on this slide. First, I will present the paper abstract, then provide a brief biography of Julian Bream, speak to the significance of the Bream repertoire in relation to the standard repertoire that came before, list all of the pieces written for Julian Bream, present a few of the lesser-known gems from the Bream repertoire, and explain how my treatise can be of use to anyone interested in these pieces, and to provide a bibliography for further study for those who are interested. The purpose of this lecture is to present a survey of the solo works written for Julian Bream, and to illuminate their historical significance and lasting importance to the guitar repertoire. Many of the works written for Julian Bream have found a place within the standard repertoire. This presentation will focus on the many additional works that are not as widely played. We'll focus on Dennis Apivour's Variations Opus 29, Tom Eastwood's Ballade Fantasy, and Peter Maxwell Davies' Hill Runes. While I imagine that most in attendance are familiar with the playing and legacy of Julian Bream, since GFA is an educational organization and we may have some beginning guitarists listening, here are some brief biographical points. Born in 1933, Julian Bream is one of the greatest living guitarists. Although largely self-taught, he managed to cultivate a concert career wherein he toured the globe for over 50 years before declaring his retirement in the early 2000s. He produced dozens of records for the RCA and EMI labels, and having taught himself to play the lute, was an early advocate in the historically informed performance movement. In 1985, he was appointed commander of the British Empire. As we will discuss in this lecture, he has commissioned and cultivated what is arguably the most significant contribution to the guitar repertoire since Segovia. As most of us know, before Bream, there were three main sources of repertoire for the classical guitar: the music of the 19th century guitar composers, music written for the lute and vihuela that could be transcribed for the guitar, and the Segovia repertoire. Now, all of this music was included in Segovia's repertoire, but what I mean by the Segovia repertoire is music commissioned by Segovia. Longtime guitar reviewer and music critic for the New York Times, Alan Kozin, dubbed the Segovia composers the Segovia Six: Joaquin Turina, Federico Moreno Torroba, Alexander Tansman, Mario Castelnuovo Tedesco, Hitor Villalobos, and Manuel Ponce. These Segovia Six created a vast repertoire of pieces that satisfied the maestro's need for new repertoire that was both compositionally sound and compelling to general audiences. In my research, I found a description of Torroba's music by Graham Wade, and I thought it was relatively accurate in describing most of the music of the Six, except for possibly Villalobos, who, to my ears at least, is the most progressive sounding of the Six. This may be a little unfair to some of them, but once you hear it, it'll make sense. Graham Wade described Torroba's music as undemanding on the listener, very rhythmic, concise, with imaginative titles, and closely linked with the dances of Spanish folk music, though without being too dependent on flamenco motifs. So, in summation, with Segovia, we had a repertoire of mostly short, beautiful, and mostly Spanish-flavored pieces, which were pleasing to listen to by all who attended his concerts or purchased his records. I'll give you just a moment to read this quote David Tannenbaum gave about the Segovia repertoire while being interviewed for my treatise. And just in case you've forgotten what the Segovia repertoire sounds like here at GFA, I'm sure you haven't, I'll play a short excerpt of Segovia performing the first movement of the Torroba Sonatina.